the road and behind the neighbor's house into the woods. How can they even see in the woods at night? He asked. I picked up my mother and we went to the police station. I figured this one would be best in person. All these strange events barely seemed coherent, but I got the feeling it was all connected in some way. The police were baffled. They admitted someone was harassing me, but without more evidence, there was really nothing they could do. When we were making the report, my mom told me she was thinking about something just after this happened, because it struck her as odd.
Do you remember how you had this dial-up modem? And when you'd run it, you could swear you hear a little voice inside talking to you?
The way she said it, like it was nothing, sent a shiver through me, because I didn't remember that at all. What? Was all I could say.
Yes, you'd set it a go, and in all the beeps and pops, you said there was a little voice in there with a message. To me, it was a lot of crazy noise, but you made me get real close and listen. And you told me it was saying, "Everything's better in here. Abracadabra." Can't believe I even remembered that.
I told her I couldn't remember that. That sounds crazy, but she just gave me a blank stare. I thought maybe she was concerned, so I started to tell her about what was happening. The whole Angelica thing, so she'd understand. I was saying, "You remember that girl I used to chat with online in the 90s, Angelica?" She kept giving me a blank stare, like she couldn't understand me. So I told her more. How I met her on the web ring my Fortune City page was on. And didn't she remember my homepage at least? She shook her head. What she said next scared me in a way I've never been scared before. She told me she got an internet connection after I left for college to email me, but before that...
We never even had the internet in our home.
I said she must have gotten hit in the head because I remember distinctly all these experiences being online. Building my homepage, YIFNet, IRC, ICQ, all of that was when I was in high school. She flat denied it. She said she remembered, though, that I used to tell her I'd found a way to get into the internet without a connection. I'd have to call some number with my modem. Then I'd have to sit still at the screen for a few minutes, something like that. She always thought I was joking. Before Detective Terrio came to us, she looked into my eyes.
We should be careful on that internet, you know. A lot of bad things on there.
She rose to shake the detective's hand. I was grateful to get off the subject. The detective offered to have a friend in computer forensics take a look at some of the sites I'd reported, but he didn't have much hope. After I got home, I secured the house one more time. Then I got to work. The best lead I had at that point was this Holy Moses character, so I downloaded MIRC to see if I could find him in his old haunts. It had been a long time since I used MIRC. I barely remembered how it worked, and there were so many channels on EFNet it would take forever. So I decided to focus on channels that would have been relevant to Angelica back in the day. I just started asking in channels like @Gothic and @Vampires if anyone knew of Holy Moses or heard of him, but each time I mentioned him, the channel fell to almost complete silence. I didn't get a yes or a no. I got ignored. Sometimes users even started to leave the channel. I was about to give up and try another avenue when I got a private message from U4728 He or she told me I shouldn't be doing what I was doing. I asked him why. He said it doesn't come off well to them, whatever that means. He also said Holy Moses is just a bot. It's been around forever, never logs off, and is almost always idling for days at a time. I told him if that were true, why was everyone so reluctant to talk about it? I didn't want to tell him Angelica's story. I just wanted to find out what he knew. He said the whole thing weirds people out because nobody knows who built Holy Moses. Nobody, over decades, no one has ever claimed ownership, not even trolls. Nobody knows where it came from, or why it's there. It doesn't do anything, it's just there, he said. That's the creepiest thing about it, it's always just there. Legends had built up around Holy Moses, he said, like it was a government supercomputer monitoring IRC, or a ghost, a bot left running long after the owner died and his bank account kept paying the bills, but no one knows. It was just there. Users tried messaging it and it never responded. It never interacts in any channel. It offers no services. It has moments of apparent activity where it's no longer idle, but no one's been able to detect what it's doing during this time, except occasionally a change of channel, seemingly at random. He said there was only one time when it did anything substantial as far as anyone knew, once in over 2 decades, and that only made things weirder. I was typing out a message to ask this guy what it was because he wasn't saying, but just then I heard what sounded like my front door slam. I paused and listened carefully, trying not to even breathe. I didn't hear anything, so I rushed out to the front door. Nobody was there, nothing disturbed. The doors were all closed and locked. I chalked it up to nerves and went back to my office. When I got back, U47284U had sent me a message. "Where'd you go? Hope nothing strange happened." That was a little eerie, but I was focused on getting answers, so I ignored it and asked what it was Holy Moses did. He said, "Fine, I'll tell you." And this is what he said happened. In 1999, at 5 a.m. CST on November 21st, Holy Moses joined the channel Ornithology and made a series of short statements. First, deceive them at 7 a.m., empty it at 9 a.m., abandon them at 6 p.m., turn back at 9 p.m., and have it your way just before midnight. Then it went offline until January 5th. Why, he asked. Why be silent and useless for years? Do that, and then never do anything after. Sometimes, when he really thought about it, he said, it gave him the serious heebie-jeebies. That was all he knew, or anyone knew, and he reiterated that I really shouldn't be looking into this and to just drop it. I thanked him for his help. I remembered a little more of what commands MIRC had after getting into the groove some, so I tried a who is on Holy Moses to see if he was out there. He was, or it was. It was on one channel only, Still Life. It'd been signed on for 16 days and idle for 3. Its ISP was showing only the letter Y. I was thinking about going to the channel and messaging him to see what would happen, but I suddenly got another message from U47284U. I told you to drop it. I know it's just text, but it freaked me out. I closed out of MIRC immediately and walked away. I figured it was just a nut trying to psych me out, and you know what? It worked. I continued to argue with my mother the next few days about what she'd said, telling her she confused reality with a Lifetime movie, but she assured me there was no internet in her house while I lived there. She said I had my floppy disks that I'd take home with me, but that was it. We went on arguing for a while before it occurred to me to ask, take home from where? She said she didn't know. I'd go out at times and I'd come home with discs. I had a Sterilite tub full of them in my closet. None of them were labeled, so she didn't know how I had any idea what was on each one, but I seemed to know. She remembered how I'd dive into my bin and dig around through all the black discs and pop up with just the one I wanted. Generally, she didn't intrude on my privacy, she said. She just saw me do it a few times. Of course, I don't remember any floppy disks. Either my mother was becoming senile or I was losing my mind. Both possibilities were upsetting. My mom's a really good person. She'd had a rough time since my dad died a few years ago, but she was super caring. She didn't like to see anyone hurt, and she could see I was truly upset, not just trying to be right. So she gave me a big hug, and she told me I should ask Ricky. Ricky. I hadn't thought of him. Ricky was an old high school buddy of mine. Well, we were friends from grade 2 until we left for college. We just drifted apart after. I had him friended on Facebook, and we never talked. You know how it goes. She said when I'd go out, wherever it was I went, I usually had Ricky with me. We'd walk all the way across the bridge into town to pass our weekends. I decided to take her advice. I sent Ricky a message on Facebook. He wrote back really fast. I was surprised because I never see status updates or any activity from him. I asked him if he was free for a phone call. I was scared about having another internet-only conversation, frankly. Facebook said he was typing a reply for about 5 minutes without anything happening. I was wondering what the hell novel he was typing, then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I know I never gave my number to Ricky, so there's no way it could be him, I thought. While I waited, I looked at my phone. Ricky started typing out periods over and over. I answered. The voice on the other end sorta sounded like Ricky, as much as I could remember, but like he was really far away on a beat-up CB. I don't know why, but it made me feel weird and uneasy. I said, I think we have a bad connection. He said it's the best possible, and that he knows. I was about to ask what he knows when he said,
alt.rec.birdwatch,
and hung up. I got a message on Facebook saying, nice catching up. He wouldn't answer anything I said after that. I asked folks I knew if Ricky was okay. Apparently, he was in a car accident years back and was mostly bedridden. I made a note to try to visit him someday. Anyway, alt.rec.birdwatch is of course a Usenet news group. I used to browse news groups all the time as a teen, mostly for the porn. I was surprised they still existed. Now I had to look up how to get to them. I remembered being able to do it through my email software, but apparently that's not a feature of Outlook anymore. So I looked up newsgroup readers and found one I'd used back in the day. Then I found some servers and started looking for alt.rec.birdwatch. When I finally found it, it turned out to be mostly British upskirt photography. I didn't understand why Ricky wanted me there until I saw a post with the header, "Remember the dog," and instantly felt clammy and cold. I didn't know why, but there was something to it, something I couldn't put my finger on. This is what the post read.
Everyone remember how sometimes you'd go in there and it'd be all dusty and no one was there, like it was abandoned years ago, but you could still go sit at a computer and get online. And remember how sometimes you'd go in and there'd be these people there and they were really weird, and they'd just watch you like you were a rat in a maze, and sometimes they were in costumes? Anyone remember the dog? Sometimes there were no people, and there was just this dog at the counter. I think it was a golden retriever. It never panted, but it watched. And sometimes it'd make you do things.
That was it, and that was enough. I was trembling, and I didn't know why. It didn't look like anyone had replied to the message, and it had been posted 3 years ago. It seemed so out of place. I kind of started to remember. I remembered at least that there was an internet cafe in town. It didn't last long, like most internet cafes. It popped up around 96, 97 to take advantage of the internet craze and let people who didn't own computers experience the wonder. When personal computers became more common, they died a quick death. The cafe was popular with the teens in 96. It got stale after that. That's when something happened to it. It changed management or something. It changed. We tried going back just to hang out, but most kids didn't want to be there anymore. I had some friends who just wouldn't go, or say why, but Ricky and I would hang out there all the time. Why couldn't I remember that before? Maybe Mom was right all along. Maybe that's where I was on the internet. I replied to the newsgroup message with, "Why wasn't I able to remember?" It was a long shot since the post was so old. Then I started looking through the other posts to see if there were others like it. There were others like it. They were all vague, but I knew what they were about. I knew. Someone posted, "Sometimes when we were hanging out, we thought we were there for just an hour or so, but when we came out, the whole day had passed. And when we talked about what we did there, we had completely different stories. Even though we were together the whole time, it was like an acid trip, and we were stupid kids, so we kept going. The Egypt. That's what the place was called. None of these people would say its name, but I remembered it then, suddenly. That strange internet cafe just behind the post office where I didn't even realize there was commercial space before. The Egypt. Someone else posted. There was this one time when my friend dragged me along and I didn't feel like being there. The owners or staff or whatever weren't there that day. It was the dog. I don't like to think about it. Remember how it never panted? Somehow that sticks out after all this time. We weren't just goofing off, nothing special. When I looked over at my friend's screen, he was watching a live webcam of my bedroom, just staring at it. I'm thinking this is a dumb joke, but it pisses me off. So I told him that was weird, and I was not okay with the webcam in my room. He just said, something's going to happen. Gave me the heebie-jeebies. He wasn't joking, and it didn't even sound like him. Here's the thing that gets me most. I decided to leave, but need to piss first. On the way out, I go over to my buddy, and he's still watching the webcam. That annoys me, but worse when I look at the screen. Someone's in my bedroom, ransacking the place. Under the mattress, in the drawers. I'm ready to go home and get one of my dad's golf clubs. Then the guy looks right at the camera and starts taking it down. I saw the dude's face. It was me. No doubt about it. That was my face. How is that possible? You're thinking the webcam wasn't live, but it was. Someone replied to that post with, when you were in the bedroom, did you try knocking on the wall? Someone knocks back. Someone replied to that with, I did. He said he'd let me in, but there's no door. In the sea of birdwatching photos and upskirts dating back to '95, that was all I could find. Took me all night. I closed it down. It was too much. I was psyching myself out. The next day, I had a reply to my post asking why I couldn't remember. It read, you weren't meant to. I felt it then, that something really wrong would happen in that place, the Egypt. So, I started doing some research into local records to see if I could find who owned it. They're public records, so it wasn't hard. I'd expected to find some change in management in the 90s, or where the place got sold in the 2000s. I expected wrong. It was purchased in 1980, and it had the same owner ever since. A company or organization called the New Way. It sounded like a cult. The weird thing is, that place was never used before the Egypt, as far as I know. In 1980, there wasn't really an internet, so who would buy a place and do nothing with it for 15 years, just waiting for the internet to happen? It all seemed too mysterious. Plus, there was nothing about this company anywhere. It's hard to describe how alone I started to feel at this time. I talked to some people in my life about what was going on, but their help was limited. That's why I decided to go back to alt.rec.birdwatch, if it was still there. At least there, someone might have been having a similar experience, so I made my post. I asked if anyone else had heard of the New Way. Then I waited. To my surprise, I got a call from Ben right after. He asked me if I'd done anything recently. I asked him to be more specific. You must have done something because something happened, he said. I still had no idea what he meant. He sounded strange. His words were just slightly slurred, and there was no accent anywhere in his sentences. Just a string of words, almost like a robot, but not quite. And it had that distant quality Ricky's call had. Something's happening right now, he told me. I booted it up again. Ben was just the most rational, bland guy. Something was definitely wrong for him to be acting like this. I asked him if he was okay. He said that I needed to check my messages. I asked, what messages? He insisted. Listen, you have to check your messages. They've been waiting for you. The whole thing didn't feel right at all. I asked him again what messages he meant. All I heard was a little whispering sound, like... I thought I was losing him, but when I listened carefully and turned up the volume, I heard it. Please. He was saying over and over and over. I felt a pit in my stomach. I asked if he needed help, if there was anything I could do,